So I recently posted a poll on my page asking which project you'd like to see me make in my next video. And the results were actually pretty even, which I was happy about because I'm actually planning on making all 4 of those projects. So I'm glad that there was kind of something for everyone in there. But I was watching the poll kind of in the early couple days, and the one that was winning out was the yellow cotton and linen dress. So that's what I've decided to go ahead and make. And this one was actually also a project that I had put in my kind of fall winter projects list and haven't gotten around to making yet. So it's something that I wanted to make for a little while now, so I'm finally getting around to it. So originally I was planning on making the Romy gathered dress by Sew House 7, which is kind of an oversized dress with very like voluminous sleeves, gathering. And I actually have a few of this style of dress in my closet already, and to be honest, gathering is probably one of my least favorite sewing techniques. So doing something that has a full gathered skirt as well as sleeves that are gathered on both sides just doesn't really appeal to me at the moment. But I was looking on Sew House 7's website and I actually came across their Wildwood wrap dress, which I also really like. And then I was digging through my sewing pattern document folder on my computer and I saw that I actually had already purchased the Wildwood wrap dress before. And already had it in my files. So long story short, I've decided to make the Wildwood wrap dress instead of the Romy gathered dress. This is the fabric that I'm going to use. This is bio washed cotton linen and it's in the color 8 golden beige from 209 fabric. And it's really beautiful. It's like light, really drapey. The color is just, I don't know if it comes up on camera very well, but it's like a really nice, kind of almost a soft yellow. Like a yellowish beige. So I was really drawn to this color. I'm not really sure why. I think I kind of have 2 personalities when it comes to my wardrobe. One part of me is very minimalist and kind of classic and likes very neutral colors, very basic pieces, kind of like key foundation wardrobe basics. I'm a big fan of like a neutral outfit, like white, black, tan, maybe a bit of navy or denim as kind of like an accent neutral. But yeah, I think a lot of the time that's kind of the style that I'm drawn to personally. But then when I'm sewing, it's kind of the opposite. I'm very drawn to a lot of colors, a lot of prints. Obviously sewing, there's so many different fabrics you can choose from, so many beautiful colors out there. And you really just get to have fun making your wardrobe. And I mean, you can sew a lot of neutral clothing as well if that's what you want and that's what your style is. But I kind of find it hard to keep that in my head when I'm shopping for fabric, just because some of the colors are so beautiful and I just get so drawn to them. So that's kind of the story of this color. I just really loved it and I was really drawn to it, and I don't have anything else in my closet that is this color. So I think this is going to make for a really nice wrap dress, something that I can obviously easily wear in spring and summer. And then in the cooler months, I think it could absolutely be layered over like a lighter turtleneck, worn over some leggings as well, kind of to warm it up. So I'm hoping that this can be a really like year-round piece. And I'm also planning on updating the pattern a little bit and adding some long sleeves. So there's 2 views to the pattern. View A kind of has just a regular sleeve, and then view B has a bit of a longer sleeve which you actually roll up. So I'm going to make view A and then try to kind of self-draft a longer sleeve and attach it. I have 3 yards of this fabric, which is about as much as I need for the original pattern. So we're going to see if I can fit a sleeve in here. They're usually pretty wide, so it's a bit difficult to try and squeeze them in, but we'll see. So first things first, I have to throw my fabric in the wash, you know the drill. While that's going, I'm going to go ahead and print out my pattern and read through all the instructions so that I'm prepped and ready to go. So let's get started. So I usually pre-wash my fabrics using cold water and a little detergent, and then tumble dry them on low just to get rid of any shrinkage. And then when the garment is finished, I always hang them to dry. While that's washing, I'm just sitting down to prep the pattern. This is usually pretty time consuming, especially for a pattern that's this big. So I usually put on a podcast to listen to, and right now I'm really enjoying Stuff You Should Know. It's one of my favorite podcasts, and I definitely listened to a few really good episodes while making this dress. I should also mention here that I cut a size 8, so my measurements put me at a size 10. However, I made the Sew House 7 Burnside bibs in an 8 previously, which worked well for me, and plus it's a wrap dress, so it's going to have a little bit of room. To draft the sleeve pattern, I overlapped the bodice pattern at the shoulders by the width of the total seam allowance, which is 5/8, and taped them together temporarily. Then I used the edge that created to draw a line which formed the top of my sleeve. For the rest of the sleeve, I actually used the pattern from the LB pullover, which is a project I've actually already cut out but haven't finished yet. So the pattern was already kicking around and easy for me to grab and use to quickly trace over. Once the sleeve pattern piece was cut out, I folded it in half to mark the grain line and make sure it was symmetrical, and I also lined it up against my pattern one more time to double check that it would fit. Here I'm laying out my fabric and just making sure that the selvages match so it's all lined up properly, and then I'm laying out the pattern pieces to get a sense of how to cut it out. So I typically don't follow the suggested layouts in patterns because I find I'm usually able to find a more efficient layout if I try a few myself. My process is to start with the biggest pieces and then the pieces on the fold first, and then work my way down and around those, trying to minimize fabric waste as much as possible while I go. In the end, I had just enough for the long skirt view and the addition of my sleeve, with just a little bit left over. And then I decided to wait to cut out my sleeve in case I wanted to make a quick muslin to test it first because I didn't have enough fabric to make another pair, so I needed to make sure that this one was right. The first section of the pattern is assembling the bodice, and at first these pattern pieces looked a little bit crazy, but once I got going it all kind of clicked and came together. I wasn't able to mark the pleats very well on this fabric because none of the chalk colors that I had showed up very well, so I ended up trying to mark them as best I could with pins, which was a bit of a struggle, but we got there in the end. Now onto the collar. I honestly ran into quite a bit of trouble here. The original pattern uses a French seam so that it looks nice if you're rolling up the sleeves for view B. I wanted to cut that out because I wasn't going to be rolling up my sleeves, but the neckline is really complicated and so I couldn't really figure out how to do it with just a regular seam. So I went ahead with the French seam, but unfortunately I found it impossible to get it to lie flat at the shoulder pivot points, and ended up with puckers on both sides after multiple attempts, which was really frustrating. To be fair, the pattern does say at this point that it takes some finagling, but no matter what I did, the fabric still bunched, so maybe I was just doing something wrong, I'm not sure, but I think it could be because for the French seam, you sew one seam at the 1/4 inch seam allowance first, and then enclose it in a seam at 3/8. And you need to clip into the corners at the shoulder pivot points, but you can only do that on the first 1/4 inch seam. So your second 3/8 seam has no clipping at the corners, and there's just no way to pivot that corner and have it lie flat on a 3/8 seam allowance without it puckering. So here was the result of my first attempt, which as you can see was just a total mess. And after lots of unpicking and trying again, I finally got it to a place where I was fine to just leave it. It's definitely not perfect, but from the right side it does kind of blend into the pleats, so I'm hoping that it's not too noticeable. Here was my first fit test. I had just pinned the side seams at this point so that I could still go in and attach the sleeves. I did end up testing the sleeve really quickly by pinning the piece I'd already cut out for my LB pullover, and it seemed fine, so I went ahead and cut my sleeve piece out. And then to attach it, I lined up the sleeve seams right side together and stitched at a 3/8 seam allowance, then serged the seam allowances together to finish them before pressing them down towards the sleeve. And after that I could just continue along with the pattern instructions by sewing the sleeve and side seams all in one go, starting from the sleeve cuff and then down the bodice, and after hemming my sleeves, the bodice was complete. Then it was time to assemble the pockets and skirt, and I found the rest of the pattern pretty straightforward from this point on. The skirt has these really nice deep slant pockets, which I really like, and it's also shaped really nicely with the darts on the back piece. Here I'm attaching the bodice to the skirt, and one thing I really appreciated with this pattern, and just Sew House 7 patterns in general, was how well everything lined up. So the notches were always in the right place, and sometimes with patterns I find that they can just be a little bit off, but these ones were exact, and it made the process so much easier and more satisfying. I didn't have any twill tape for the inner ties, so I ended up making my own out of some of the leftover fabric scraps. To do that, I just cut a long piece about 1.5 inches wide and then folded it in on itself twice to end up with a tie about 3/8 of an inch wide, similar to making a piece of bias tape, just not cut on the bias. And then I top stitched all the way around, enclosed one end so it was finished, and left the other end open, which is where I would attach it to the dress. I was really impressed by how everything came together in the end, with the skirt facings and the ties and the button loop. It just has such a professional finish, and it was really satisfying doing that last long line of stitching all the way around the facing of the skirt to finish it off. To finish off the main dress, I hand stitched on a button for the closure. I went into my old button stash, and unfortunately I didn't actually have a yellow one, which was basically the only color I didn't have. So I ended up going with an off-white one just because it was the closest color. Not that it really matters because the belt ends up covering this part of the dress anyway. So onto the belt, I got this Dritz loop turner a while ago, and this is actually the first chance I've had to use it. It actually worked pretty well, but I think it works better when you have an open tube of fabric, whereas with the ties, they are open only on one end. So I had to kind of hook the fabric around it, and it actually ended up making a tiny hole on each one. But honestly, I don't know how else I would have turned these right side out, so it was a huge help. I thought the way the belt was done was really cool. So you stitch the ties to the inside and then use one of them to pull it to the right side. The only problem was I actually left the end of the wrong side sticking out, so I totally ruined it, and I was so excited for it, and I didn't get to have my big reveal, but thankfully my little loop turner saved the day again, and I was able to fish out the end of the other tie and get it turned right side out. So here is the finished dress. Firstly, I apologize for the weird angle here. There's actually not many places in our house where I can film a full body shot with good lighting and nothing cluttering up the background. But anyway, I just put on a pair of sandal heels because for some reason they felt super appropriate with this dress, and that created my final look. Okay, so I thought I would just finish off this video by talking through some of my final thoughts on the pattern. Overall, I really enjoyed this pattern. I thought that it came together really well. I thought that a lot of the finishing touches were really beautiful. And just the level of finish, for example, the way that the skirt is finished with the facing, it just looks very professional, very crisp. So overall, I would definitely recommend this pattern. I think it's great. I am a little bit annoyed still about the problem that I had at the neckline. It could be user error, but I just, no matter what I did, there was no way that I could get it to lie flat and it's still puckered. And it's just such a shame because I do feel like the neckline is such a gorgeous feature of this dress. I don't think it's super noticeable. It's on both sides here and kind of with the fold collar. You can't really see it very much. So that's the only reason why I wouldn't give this pattern kind of full marks. But overall I thought it was enjoyable, it was complex without being too challenging, which kept things interesting. And yeah, I'm very happy with the result. In terms of the size, I'm happy that I went down to a size 8. I think it fits really well in the bust and throughout the hip area. Because it is a wrap dress and has kind of a variable size, I think that sizing down was kind of the right move just to make sure that I didn't have too much fabric kind of going on anywhere. I did cheat a little bit though by letting out the seams on the sides. So the side seams of the bodice and the skirt, I did a 3/8 seam allowance, whereas the pattern called for 5/8. So I gave myself about 1/4 inch of give there. But otherwise this is just a full size 8. I'm also really happy with how the long sleeves turned out. I think that these worked out quite well. The only thing is there's kind of a weird bit of bunching going on back here. When my arm is just relaxed, you can't really see it, but maybe you can see it in the try-on video. So I'm not sure what caused that, but it's probably just because the sleeve isn't really meant to have a long sleeve attached to it. But because of, you know, all of the kind of volume in the bodice and in the wrap dress, in total I think it doesn't really take away from it too much, hopefully. The one thing that I'm realizing while I'm sitting here is that it does fall open. So in the instructions there is an option to add a hook and eye closure to kind of the front part of the dress and one of the interior pockets. So I'm thinking that I'm going to have to do that because sitting here it's just completely open. And then in terms of fabric, I love the color of this fabric and I really like the feel of it. It's a little bit, I don't want to say stiff, but it definitely has structure to it. So I think that's the cotton coming through. It is a cotton linen blend, so I think that's where kind of that structure comes from. And I think maybe what I would really love to see this dress in is something with a bit more of a fluid drape, so something like a beautiful silk. I think that would be absolutely gorgeous with how this dress drapes. So yeah, I think overall that is my final thoughts. Let me know what you think of this pattern and how I did in the comments below, and also let me know which pattern you'd like to see me do in my next video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.